Let's look at demystifying some of the principles of CPTED. There's a lot to consider, a lot to think about, and of course every home is going to be different. Your situation is going to be different from mine, and your neighbor's house is going to look different from yours. But we can take a look at how we would put those basic principles into play around this simple house. So let's take a look at this house. Let's put a front door here, a little porch action, maybe a little walkway. And let's put a back door over here. It's going to open up that way. Again, a little porch, the back, and we'll put windows. Put windows in all the way around the house. If we consider that kind of a typical layout, front door, back door, windows all around the house, we're going to put the front street out here, put in a sidewalk here, put in some neighbor houses, right? You can imagine all that. Now let's really get to the point where we're going to talk about what else is in our environment. What can we design around this house? If we got a fixed house, the street we're not going to move. The number of windows, locations of doors, things like that, we're probably not going to change. These would be major, major issues. Changing the street really means moving out of this house, moving into another one. Changing the windows and doorways would be major construction. But if we imagine that there are trees and shrubs all around the house, and some trees and shrubs, maybe a hedgerow here out in front of the house and beside the house, we can start to look at some opportunities to put our CPTED into place. We make these trees here. I'll put in a tree there. Well, if this tree blocks the entire view of the person inside the home out into this area of the yard, an area where someone could come through the hedgerow, someone could be moving around the house, maybe we had some lighting that was actually shining here off the corner of the house, and the entire front area of the walkway is blocked because of the shadow that that tree casts over here, well then that tree is really causing a problem. So one of the things when it comes to surveillance, seeing or be seen, that we would do right away in this diagram is get rid of that tree, or at least trim it so that there were no leaves below the height of that window, no leaves or branches maybe blocking or below the height of that light. But if it were the trunk itself and we had all kinds of other issues created by the thickness of that trunk, it's going to be easier just to completely get rid of that. Now these shrubs that are all around the house, we want to make sure that they're trimmed down to a level where we can see out the windows, and that if we're walking up this walkway, no one could be hiding behind them. That could mean trimming them up. Keep that lower 12 to 18 inches clear, and of course keep them below the area of the window, or maybe, you know, the first few inches of the window. We're probably not going to need to look straight down into the front yard, so they can cover the windowsill a little bit, that's fine, but we want to make sure that we have clear fields of view there. And also that will allow us, if we make sure that this one is trimmed appropriately here in this corner, to see from that window onto the porch or down the walkway as someone comes in the yard. Now this hedgerow that I drew in here on the perimeter of the property, if that's 18 inches off the ground, well below waist level, no big deal. It'll serve as access control, it'll serve as a boundary establishment, and it won't block the view of the people on the street that are actually looking in towards the house. That's a perfect combination of all the things we want when it comes to using our landscaping to enforce CPTED principles, especially because this street and the sidewalk are here. That implies that there's going to be traffic, that implies there's going to be foot traffic, there's going to be people moving around out here. We want them to be able to see what's going on in the front of our house. We want them to be able to see beyond this hedgerow, because as I've drawn it in here, obviously it'd be very easy to get in behind the hedgerow even if they just came in on the walkway, and that criminal would then have isolation and anonymity, and we don't want that in this environment. Again, if we had a neighbor's house over here, we want to make sure that the neighbor, when they look out their windows or when they're walking down their walkway or parking in their driveway, that they are able to see over that hedgerow also. And again, by having that low hedgerow, or we could make that a fence, right? We could put that in as a fence line also. By having some kind of a decorative fence or a boundary establishing fence that we can still see through or see over, we now will encourage contact between our neighbors and our family. This way we become invested, we become friends, it becomes habit to look over and see if the neighbors are in their yard. We may see crime over here, or a criminal driving by looking for a target of opportunity may simply think, wow, Too many people, too much open access, too many line of sight areas into the windows and doors. That's not a target area for me.